Known as the Green State for good reason, Vermont lies on the extreme northeast of the United States. It's a rugged land made up of mountainous terrain, boasting dense forests and meandering rivers. It serves as a playground for the ardent outdoorsman and those looking for rugged sporting challenges. So dense are some of its forests that people tend to shy away from backcountry exploration. This is further backed up by campsite tales of disappearances over the years, many of which have never been solved. Now, if there was to be any one area of the state to be singled out for these tales, it would be the small area known as the Bennington Triangle. This is not a place one would be advised to hike alone, given tales from its past that suggest darker forces to be at play. But before we get into all of that, I'd like to firstly apologise for the 1 month of downtime since my last upload. I work as a photographer and I've been working on a contract that's seen me shooting into the late hours of each evening and editing during the day. So if you're a fan of the weird, wonderful, unexplained and downright criminally insane, then I've got some stories for you, and you're in the right place. And in this episode, we're going to be looking at a place cloaked in mystery. If you're comfy, let's take a trip into the forest by night to a place where people have simply disappeared without trace, never to be seen again. This is the Bennington Triangle, here on the flip side. The Bennington Triangle covers an area of mountainous terrain around the Glastonbury Mountain in Vermont. It's a place that's often been recounted in tales of wild and unexplained encounters, including accounts of UFO sightings, Bigfoot encounters, strange lights and sounds coming from the hills, but even more sinister is the fact that as many as 10 people have disappeared in the area between the 1920s and 1950s. The area is said to be cursed, according to Native American lore. An Algonquin Indian legend also warns of a malevolent stone in the mountains that would open up and devour anyone unlucky enough to step on it. For more than 2 centuries, there have also been numerous sightings of a Bigfoot-like creature in the Glastonbury Mountain area, which simply became known as the Bennington Monster. Now, one of the first reported sightings of this beast occurred in the late 1800s, when a stagecoach full of passengers was forced to stop on a washed-out road. Now, the stage driver first noticed very large footprints in the mud that were simply too large to have been made by a human. A short while later, the coach was attacked by a large creature who literally knocked the vehicle on its side. Frightened passengers could only see a pair of eyes staring at them from deep within a shaggy form, before the monster roared and ran off into the forest. Later sightings described the creature as being large, hairy and standing well in excess of 6 feet. Now, there have long been stories of people going missing in the area, including a man named Carol Henrick in 1943. Herrick went missing during a hunting trip about 10 miles northeast of the ghost town of Glastonbury. His body was discovered 3 days later, surrounded by large mysterious footprints, and injuries to the body suggested that he'd been squeezed to death. More disappearances occurred between 1945 and 1950. 5 people, in fact, disappeared in the Bennington area alone. The first occurred on November the 12th, 1945, when 74-year-old Middy Rivers disappeared whilst out hunting. A rugged mountain man, Rivers was guiding a group of 4 other hunters into the mountains. But on his way back, Rivers got ahead of the group and was never seen again. Now, an extensive search was conducted, but the only evidence discovered was a single rifle cartridge that was found in a stream. The speculation was that Rivers had leaned over and the cartridge had dropped out of his pocket into the water. The disappearance had occurred in an area known as the Long Trail Road, which was close to the main road known as Vermont Route 9. Rivers was an experienced hunter and fisherman and was familiar with the local area, which made his disappearance even more bizarre. Now, it soon became apparent that something strange had happened in the area, and the phrase the Bennington Triangle was eventually coined by a New England author, Joseph A. Citro, in 1992. The stretch of woodlands around the Glastonbury Mountain includes the towns of Bennington, Woodford and Shaftesbury, as well as the ghost towns of Somerset and Glastonbury. These 2 latter villages were at one time thriving logging and industrial spots that went into decline towards the late 19th century. Now, To this day, they're essentially ghost towns and were both unincorporated by the state legislature in 1937. While there have been several disappearances in the area, one of the most famous stories of the Bennington Triangle is that of Paula Weldon, who vanished in 1946. Now, on December the 1st, 1946, a year after Maddie Rivers disappeared, 18-year-old Paula Jean Weldon had just finished her job at Bennington College. She worked 2 shifts at the dining hall and went back to her dorm room where she changed her clothes. She told her roommate, Elizabeth Johnson, that she was going out for a hike to get some fresh air and clear her mind. Elizabeth later reported that she remembered Paula as saying how she was feeling a bit depressed in the previous days because she told her that she was homesick. Paula evidently hadn't been home for Thanksgiving for a while. Paula was the eldest of 4 daughters. She stood 5'5" and weighed a mere 123 pounds. She had a greyish scar on her left knee, a vaccination mark on her right thigh, and a small scar underneath her left eyebrow. On that day, the last time that she was seen by anybody, Paula was wearing a red jacket with a fur-trimmed hood, blue jeans and white sneakers. She had on a small gold wristwatch with a narrow black band. It was 50 degrees when Paula left the campus, which explained her light clothing. But by the evening, temperatures had dropped dramatically. By Monday morning, it was just 9 degrees Fahrenheit in Bennington. Paula was seen by a few other students heading towards Route 67A. Now, Danny Fager, who was at the gas station across from the college entrance, saw Paula walking down the road at around 2:30 p.m. Motorist Louis Knapp picked her up at around 2:45 p.m. and drove her as far as his home on Route 9, which was about 3 miles from the trailhead where she planned to start her hike. Now, sometime around 4 p.m, Ernest Whitman and 3 of his friends came out of a camp in Bickford Hollow and saw Paula. She had asked Ernie about the length of the trail before she headed towards a bridge that led to it. Other students claimed to have seen her in the area, but the reliability of those reports weren't that tremendously clear. With darkness soon falling, Paula was thought to be on the trail with inadequate clothing and no supplies, a surefire recipe for disaster. After Paula didn't show up to her class on Monday, December the 2nd, the director of admissions, one Miss Mary Gannett, called the state's attorney, Mr. William Jerome Jr., to come to the college by noon. Paula's father, William, was also called in. Now, someone remembered how Paula had once said that she would like to visit the Everett Cave on Mount Anthony. So a man named Henry Steele, who worked as a guide, along with some students, headed to the cave that afternoon to search for her. A search that sadly turned out empty. A local taxi driver, Abe Ruskin, also told authorities that he took a student to the bus station on Sunday afternoon, but he wasn't able to positively identify that person as Paula. There were a number of possible buses that she could have taken, but the clerks of the station didn't remember anyone of her description because it was simply too busy of a day. There was a waitress at a local restaurant, however, called Aura Telletier, who served on a girl matching Paula's description at 9:30 p.m. that Sunday evening. Aura, the waitress, said the girl was with a young man who was aged around 25 years old, but who was drunk and abusive. When he came to the counter, the girl signalled her to come over. She asked the waitress how far it was to the town of Bennington, and unlike her companion, the girl had not been drinking but seemed a bit dazed. Now, on Monday evening, the media reported Paula as missing. Authorities in New York and Massachusetts were alerted and photographs were circulated. Since no one knew where Paula went, no formal search or rescue efforts had been started at that time. Now, on Tuesday, December 3rd, 1946, searches were carried out on college campus and the section of the long trail that led to Glastonbury Fire Station, which crosses Route 9. Many people were involved in the search, including the superintendent of the college, a hunter by the name of Herman Spencer, fellow college students, Boy Scouts, members of the Green Mountain Club, and 30 or so residents from the immediate area. At 5:30 p.m. on that Tuesday evening, Whitman, a night watchman for the Banner newspaper, saw a photo of Paula on the front page of the newspaper, and he told reporter Pete Stevenson that he spoke to that same girl at around 4 p.m. on Sunday afternoon in Woodford. Ernie recounted that Paula had asked him for directions to the trailhead and about the length of the trail itself. 3 additional residents of Woodford all confirmed that they saw the girl walking towards the long trail. She was last seen heading towards a camp area called Hunter's Rest. Now, 3 men on a similar search for Paula walked towards Glastonbury, but the going was tough due to the 3 inches of snow that fell during Sunday night, the night that Paula went missing. Now, it was unlikely, or it was thought unlikely, that Paula could have reached the Hunter's Rest because she simply would have had too much trouble crossing the stream, and she was only wearing a pair of sneakers. Now, as the search continued for Paula, it grew larger and more elaborate. By the Wednesday afternoon, it included 5 aircraft as well as an additional 120 men from the State Guard. There were 500 searchers involved at one point. Now, to keep things organised, each searcher carried confetti in order to drop that at locations that they searched to signal that they had already been there. During the search, a faculty member from Bennington College found footprints that appeared to have been left by sneakers, but that was the only thing remotely connected to Paula. Even though they were 500 strong, this massive search still came up empty. The authorities believe Paula was not in the area. Now, a $500 reward was offered to anyone who had any information leading to the location of Paula, dead or alive. $500 in the 1940s would have been equivalent to a sum closing in on $10,000 in today's money. Now, despite the account being given by Paula's roommate, who reported that Paula was depressed, girls in Paula's dorm said she seemed overtly upbeat. With that in mind, it was suggested that Paula may have decided on making changes in her life and used the hike as a way of coming to terms with those life choices. On December 15th, the official search for Paula Weldon was called off. The following May, when the snows melted, Paula's father organised a 2-day search, but to no avail. At first, he was content with how thorough the authorities' searches had been, but sadly that was a sentiment that would change over time. He eventually became critical of their lack of sophisticated methods in the case. His complaints were the catalyst for the founding of the Vermont State Police just 7 months later. Paula's body nor her possessions were ever found, and the case remains open to this day. But the string of disappearances continued. Now, a third disappearance happened exactly 3 years to the day that Paula Weldon disappeared. On December 1st, 1949, a 68-year-old man by the name of James E. Tedford boarded a bus heading to Bennington after having visited family members in the small town of St. Albans. Multiple eyewitnesses, including the bus driver, confirmed that Tedford was in his seat as late as on the last stop before reaching Bennington. However, when the bus pulled into Bennington, Tedford had somehow and inexplicably disappeared. After the man seemingly vanished into thin air while he was inside a moving vehicle, passengers were baffled and noted that Tedford's luggage and an open bus timetable were still on his seat. If the witnesses were correct, Tedford disappeared from his seat as the bus was moving down Route 7 through the Bennington Triangle. 10 months later, on October 12, 1950, an 8-year-old boy by the name of Paul Jepson was the 4th person to go missing in the area. He was last seen playing in his family pickup truck by his mother, who had incidentally gone out to feed the pigs at the dump where she and her husband worked. The boy simply vanished without trace. Hundreds got together to form a search party, and a New Hampshire sheriff brought in a bloodhound to help sniff out the missing child. Now, at first, the dog was able to pick up his scent, but suddenly lost that trail again at a nearby crossroads. Now, that could mean that the boy was abducted by someone in a car. Now, as the case dragged on without any sign of Paul, the boy's father told the Albany Times-Union that it could possibly have been the lure of the mountains that pulled his son in. Apparently, the boy talked of nothing else for days before he disappeared, and sadly, no trace of little Paul was ever found. And just 2 weeks later, on October 28, 1950, 53-year-old Frida Langer, who was an experienced hiker and survivalist and very familiar with the area, went missing on the Long Trail near Somerset Village bordering East Glastonbury. After she hiked a short 1.5 miles with her cousin, Herbert Eisner, Frida fell into a stream. Now wet, she went back to the camp to change her clothes with the idea of catching up to the group. Back at the camp, her husband had been resting his injured knee, which is why he hadn't joined them. But neither her husband nor her cousin ever saw Frida again once she set out to catch up with the group after having changed her clothing. As many as 400 people with helicopters from the Connecticut Coast Guard, soldiers from the US Army and local citizens all searched for the missing woman. They meticulously searched the surrounding areas but unfortunately found nothing, at least not immediately. Sadly, 6 months later, after she vanished, Langer's corpse was found near the Sunset Reservoir. Interestingly, it was found in an open area that had been extensively searched a number of times in the previous months. Even with her body found, the case saw little resolution. Frida's body had decayed so badly that coroners couldn't determine the cause of death. It only fueled further speculation about what kind of end she may have met, as disturbing as it could have been. Now, some people in the region believe that the 5 missing persons between 1945 and 1950 could have been the work of a serial killer. But the problem with these theories is the sheer lack of evidence to back them up. In regards to the serial killer theory, not only is there no evidence, but there's also the age and gender factor. The ages and genders of those 5 people range so dramatically, which basically flew in the face of the usual patterns that serial killers follow. And that is to suggest that they target a look or a gender or an age based on their warped sense of retribution. Others offer suggestion that the disappeared met their demise at the claws and jaws of an indigenous mountain cat like a lynx or a bobcat known as a catamount. But the problem with that theory is that bobcats and lynx are not known to be aggressive towards humans. As for the catamount, one hasn't been credibly sighted since before 1940, and they've since been declared as extinct. Well, there you have it, folks. All about the Bennington Triangle. If you've enjoyed this story, please do feel free to hit that little subscribe button down there and the notifications bell so you'll be updated as and when new content is available from yours truly. And I will leave you for now until the next time we meet here on the flip side.